Finally, after all these months, I can share with you guys my biggest win of this year. This was a 2-day tournament with 106 people from all over the country. So in this video, I'm going to take you guys kind of behind the scenes. We are going to take a close look at Google Earth and kind of see exactly what it was that I was looking for when breaking down this lake. All of the effective baits that I used throughout day 1 and day 2. I caught so many fish. This video is a true testament that Kentucky Lake is far from being irrelevant on the bass fishing scene. So here we are. This tournament took place back in May of this year, and for some reason I've had all this footage and I've been sitting on it for almost 6 months now, and I didn't think it'd be good enough footage because I dropped my GoPro in the water pre-fishing on day 1 and my microphone didn't work, so I didn't have any sound. It was extremely frustrating, and I just didn't ever think that I could produce a quality video to kind of showcase how incredible this tournament was for me. But just a couple days ago, I ended up going back through the video, and I was just blown away by the incredible footage that I had. So I thought I'd take the time, be a little creative, and put together this video on my 2-day tournament that I ended up winning on Kentucky Lake, which earned me a spot on Team USA, where I'll represent for Hobie Worlds. We'll find out hopefully later this month where we go. I've heard it's either Japan or Brazil, so that'll be another exciting detail that y'all can stay tuned for. But this video right here, we're going to talk about Kentucky Lake. So just briefly, a lot of you know when I do my tournaments, I spend a lot of time scouring through Google Earth. I use Google Earth, I use Navionics, I do a lot of reading, a lot of fishing report research from previous years. Well, typically, my strength on Kentucky Lake is ledge fishing. However, this tournament being in May, I thought it might be a little early. So I had 2 full days of pre-fishing. The first entire day, 16 hours, well into the night, I graphed ledges all day. And it was not looking good. So I was left with 1 full day to scrap and find something that I could use for this tournament. So I relied very heavily on Google Earth for this reason. Knowing the lake was up 1.5 feet, let's take a look at what specifically I was looking for. Okay, so when I started to look at Kentucky Lake, having known that the lake was about 1.5 feet above summer pool, I was able to kind of utilize Google Earth, know what time of the year these photos were taken. This is when the lake was this is when the lake was drawn down quite a bit. And knowing the lake was up 1.5 feet above summer pool, I was going to the way backs of the creeks. Like I said, I wasn't going to bank on that ledge bite, and what I was looking for was a lot of structure, specifically bushes. My fish were really keying in on the bushes, so I'd look and kind of see which creeks had the best cover. So obviously you can see here, I really like the looks of this stuff, kind of much better. That really comes out to a definitive point. There's some bushes that come out here with this little creek arm. I would have liked this a lot better than that above creek arm right there. Got a little bit of depth in that creek also. So I was really just kind of scanning around on Google Earth, going to the backs of every single one of these creeks. I would zoom in, always looking for docks for kind of secondary stuff, but just seeing what the way back looked like. I knew that's where the bait was going to be, like the bushes here, and I was just essentially looking for a game plan. 5 or 6 of these creeks to hit one day, 5 or 6 hit the next, and go from there. So I narrowed it down to about 4 or 5 creeks that I really, really liked. And the very first creek I launched at Friday morning before the tournament, there was bait popping everywhere. I made about 10 casts with a buzz bait, and when I'm pre-fishing, I'm burning that thing. I've got it on an 8-to-1 reel, and I'm literally burning it. I'm not trying to hook fish. I just want to see if I can get some reactions, kind of gauge the quality and the quantity of bass in a certain area. And out of those 10 casts, I had 4 blow-ups. I accidentally caught an 18, and the rest of the fish looked to be between 16 and 18 inches. So that told me right there, my quality's there, definitely my quantity's there. So after fishing the other 4 creeks that day, that ended up being the spot that I was going to put all my eggs into. It was a large creek. It had a creek that went way in the back, also had a ton of docks on either side, had some secondary stuff in case I needed it, had some stake beds in the middle. So with that in mind, day 1, Saturday morning, let's go on the water and kind of see how that went. That first morning, my goodness, I started using the buzzbait, kind of peppering the bushes, as you can see here, making several fan casts, trying to almost feather that buzzbait and searching for those active fish that I found. And just like clockwork, I started getting fish to blow up. I ended up having the first fish spit the bait after about 5 or 6 casts, whipped it back in there, boom, another one. Had it on for a few seconds, spit the buzzbait, came flying back at the kayak, second fish, another probably 17, 18 incher, 2 back-to-back casts. Kept my middle game strong, kept fishing. As you can see here, I'm really, really working, in this thick grass right on the outside of the bushes here. That's where a lot of my fish were. And here's another little finger of grass coming out. And again, another blow up. This time about a 16-inch fish came off. Third fish gone. Fourth fish gone. That was a big one. Luckily, I don't know how, but I managed to keep my cool. Reached back, decided to slow down. They weren't eating the buzzbait right, so I threw the caffeine shad, started throwing that around just a little bit. Kept going back to the buzzbait, decided to throw it around. Again, went way in the back of the creek, had a giant 4 or 5 pounder, hit it right in the middle of the grass, just like they had been. Missed that fish too. Luckily I was able to keep my cool, stay collected. I came out of the creek mouth, started working this flat again, and bam. Finally, first fish of the day hooked up. Definitely feeling the pressure here, but with a little patience, 18 3/4 in the net. Solid first fish. Definitely a huge reward for continuing to persevere through the first lost 5 opportunities. So decided to keep working this area. Again, went back to the caffeine shad, skipping it around the grass flats, underneath the cypress trees, underneath the low-hanging bushes. This area here is where the 2 creeks came together and provided a shallow flat, and those bass or sitting, they would move up on that. And I was able to get my second fish by kind of rotating this spot, coming back and hooking into this nice 18-incher on a caffeine shad. It's my second fish of day 1. Definitely a good fish. Continued to work, came back out of the mouth, looking for these little fingers of grass here. There's my third fish, right where he should be, right on the edge of this grass. Hammered the caffeine shad again. Another good limit fish in the net. And I was slowly working my way towards the limit. And then I went out to the deeper part of the flat, outside of the creek, and started rotating stake beds. You can see I just put down a DT6, didn't get anything on the first round, so I picked up a swim jig, made that exact same cast I had just made with a DT6 at this stake bed, and lo and behold, that's what that fish wanted. Right at the boat, right as I bumped it out of the stake bed, again, I made the same cast, the DT6, that fish didn't want it, threw a swim jig back in there, 19 3/4. I believe this was my biggest fish of day 1. There's my fourth fish, working on a solid limit on the swim jig. So then, looking for that fifth fish, I started rotating spots. I was fishing right at the mouths of the creeks, the grass flats, the stake beds, just working that caffeine shad. If I saw any type of structure in my side scan, I'd stop, put my power pole down, and make a couple casts at it. And that's what happened here. There was a nice 17 and a half incher sitting right off of a pile of stick-ups that I saw in my side scan in the mouth of the creek here. That was my limit fish. 5. I believe that put me at about 88 inches or 88 and a half. Pretty solid limit for day 1. So then I decided I had a decent limit. I didn't want to burn my spot. I went around to the docks in this particular creek and just started skipping docks, looking to see if I couldn't find a big upgrade, randomly just kind of hanging around under one of these. That day, I think I had 88 3/4 inches, which tied me for first place on day 1 with a good friend of mine, Eric Siddiqui. So the two of us were up there, upper 80s, with 6 or 7 guys right on our tail. A lot of people submitted some big bags on day 1. So that had me a little nervous, but there was a severe weather change for day 2. It was going to be windy, it was going to be rainy, a completely different forecast than day 1. So to me, I thought that was only going to make my bite better. It would probably prolong my topwater bite. I love having some cloud cover, and any type of wind was really going to help my moving bait bite. So I felt that I could have a solid performance on day 2, especially because I could lean hard on all of my spots. I didn't have to manage the fish. I could literally rip as many lips as I wanted to, and that's exactly what I planned on doing. So let's go to day 2 on the water. So as you can see, there is considerably more cloud cover, and you can see a little bit of disturbance on the water. The wind is sustained 10 mile an hour, 10, 15 mile an hour right here in the back of the creek, which I just knew that would only help both my topwater bite and my moving bait bite. And it did. This was about the first half hour of the morning. Landed my first solid fish on a buzzbait, about 16 and a half inches. 2 casts later, boom. Buzzbait still holding strong. Little smaller fish. I was slightly concerned that I wasn't getting the quality I was looking for, but I stayed at it. I power pulled down right here. That power pull was huge. Just a few casts later, I was working my way to a very quick limit. Small limit, but quick limit. And I was going to take it. I always fish better when I have a limit. There's about a 15 right there. You can see a lot of weather kind of moving my way, but I stayed anchored right where I was and just worked this area. Kept working it back and forth. When they would short strike a spinner bait or my buzz bait, I decided to switch it up and go to the swim jig, something just a little bit more subtle than the flashy spinner bait or that loud noisy buzz bait. So you can see that was kind of a pattern for me. If I were throwing a buzz bait or a spinner bait or any bait for that matter, and I'd get short striked or blown up on a miss like I do right here, you can barely see that bass come up and hit that buzz bait. This was a huge reason why I caught so many fish on day 2. I'd put that rod down, wouldn't give up on that area, was going to go for the swim jig, but decided to slow it way down, reach for this caffeine shad here. And what I would do after immediately missing a fish or getting a short strike, I would go ahead and flip something else a little slower back in that exact same area immediately after. So this was the cast after I just lost a fish. I'm going to get a caffeine shad right up into those bushes and fish it real slow. And it worked. A lot of the times it worked. I would hook that fish and work my way to building out that limit. Still looking for that big bite. You can see that my quality definitely was not the same as yesterday. And that did have me a little nervous, for sure. But I did get a limit pretty quick. I think I had maybe upper 70s, low 80s. This spot was a familiar spot from yesterday. Little stake beds in front of this group of pines here. Picked up another fish. Still not the size I'm looking for, but did cull a little bit. So about this time, the camera boat showed up. I didn't know where I was sitting. I hadn't looked at the leaderboard, but I did have a limit, so I knew I was up there, especially with my strong performance from day 1. So here's Rusty miking me up, and they're going to follow me around for the next couple of hours. So you can see I'm fishing the edge of the bushes just like clockwork, just like day 1. And those fish were still there. I was just searching for that big bite. Needed to cull several of my fish in my limit in order to be able to do this thing. Here's a caffeine shad fish. I think I had just missed one again on a spinner bait or a buzz bait. Every time that happened, skip a caffeine shad in there, work it real slow, and here's a spinner bait fish right here. I was throwing the Accent River Special spinner bait. Incredible, kind of more of a light wire spinner bait. Has an amazing vibration. This was being thrown on the St. Croix Sweeper spinnerbait rod, one of my absolute favorite spinnerbait rods. And that spinnerbait put a ton of fish on the boat. Give me a little cloud cover and a little wind. There's not much better than a spinnerbait. And then finally, on the spinnerbait, hooked into something that felt a little better. Didn't know how much better, but I knew it was bigger than those 13s, 14s, and 15s that I was kind of stuck with at that point. Camera boat's right behind me. I'm kind of excited. I'm telling Rusty, man, I think this is definitely going to cull. Look down. Definitely a cull fish. Still not the fish I was looking for. I think this was a 16 3/4, which would have culled me about 3 inches. Pretty excited about that. The guys were right there to see it, and I kept grinding. Again, that power pole was huge, and the wind allowed me to really methodically work the mouth of this creek exactly the way I wanted to. And a few of these shots, you'll see I'll have several rods hanging off the front of my kayak. If something wasn't working, if the wind changed, if the sun popped out for a split second, I was picking up a different rod. That was huge. I threw 5 or 6 different baits. I switched up my swim jig color. I switched up my swim jig trailers quite often, and that proved to target some fish when they weren't as active. Working in the very back of the creek here, and you can see how absolutely dialed I was. The little fish struck that swim jig. I went to a shad color here as opposed to the brim I had been throwing. Very next cast, you can see the sparse grass kind of sticking up in this area. Boom. That's a little bitter fish right there. I believe this was a 17.5. So finally, my quality started showing up, at least in the 16 to 17 inch range. Definitely was not enough for me to think that I could win the thing, but I definitely needed to cull those smaller fish out, and I was working my way towards that with these fish right here. So pretty big upgrades. And there were so many fish in this area. I just had to be able to put the bait where you needed to, fish it effectively, and switch it up when need be. The nice thing about day 2 and these 2-day tournaments, like I mentioned before, I don't have to manage fish. I literally kept fishing hard. I rotated all of my spots that I had done well on day 1 and kept grinding, casting. After working that flat over pretty good for the first few hours, I decided to sneak back into the actual creek. And this is this little flat where these 2 creeks converge right here. I pulled some really good fish, some key fish in my limit on day 1. So I stuck with it, working that soft jerk bait, the caffeine shad, just kind of real slow around the grass. And after catching that small fish, something finally felt really good. Got excited about this one right here. That was my my first decent fish of day 2. By decent, I mean over 18 inches. So that was a big move for me. Camera boat also was there to witness that one. Pretty neat deal. I'm kind of explaining them here what I'm doing. And I ended up staying back in this little creek, just so you can see how I'm working that caffeine shad.
It's a good fish. That's a good fish.
Another good fish. So with that, finally kind of working my way towards that limit. You can see I'm pretty excited there. Stuck with that caffeine shad a bit, kind of slowly working my way out of this creek, picking up a couple fish here and there, and swim jig fish. A lot of little fish, unfortunately, but stuck with it. Here's back out on that main flat, kind of carefully working around these bushes in the water, and kept picking them up. Definitely don't hold back on my emotions. So basically that's kind of how the rest of day 2 went. I didn't hold anything back. I kept fishing. I kept chucking baits. I kept really working my flat. I found a couple of small pockets with real sparse grass like you're seeing right here, and the fish were just loaded there. When you're on something this good and you feel, as anglers we know, when you're dialed in, you are 100% dialed in. I knew that I was getting pretty close to that time where I would need to start heading back to the ramp. I had a 2-hour drive to check in, but when the bite was that good, it's so hard to quit fishing. I think this was my last fish I caught at the tournament. Another small one, didn't help me any, but that was kind of my cue. Came up to this gentleman brim fishing off of the ramp here, had a nice conversation with him. I was in a big hurry, but I told him, I said, "Sir, I think I just won a big tournament." So I was obviously in a little bit of a hurry here. I was 2 hours from check-in. I had a lot of adrenaline going. I had a big 89 3/4 inch bag. Didn't know if that'd be enough to do it, but I was excited. I knew I'd be up there. I knew I was in contention. I'd fished so much cleaner. I probably caught 40 fish on day 2 easily. A lot of weeding through those 14, 15, 16-inch fish, but I had enough quality there to make me feel like I might be able to do this thing. In this tournament, I was able to overcome all of those mental blocks that I had going against me for the first few tournaments of the year. Despite my day 1 of losing all those fish, I stuck with it. I kept fishing hard, scrapped together a great limit, and then went out there on day 2, and I absolutely wrecked them for 2 very consistent days. And as you all know, it ended up being more than enough to take home the big win. And it earned me a spot at the Elite Tournament of Champions that happened this November. But most importantly, I became the first female in the entire world, all the countries, to legitimately qualify for Hobie Worlds. So I will be one of 7 representing Team USA, and will be competing somewhere next summer. I've heard, like I said, I've heard it's either Brazil or Japan, and that should be announced here before Christmas. So this tournament meant so much for me. It was my first big national win, and the rest of the season was essentially running off the momentum from this tournament right here. Kentucky Lake's got a very special place in my heart. This was so big for me. Being able to go through all of this footage and re-edit it and put this video together helped me go back to that weekend in May and relive the most incredible fishing performance I've had all year. So I really appreciate you guys taking the time to watch this. This one meant a lot to me. I hope you all liked it as much as I did. It was pretty exciting for me to do. So with that being said, I just got back home to Nebraska and look forward to a solid month of ice fishing videos coming your way. Again, thank you guys for watching. Thank you so much to all my sponsors for allowing me to do this thing full time, and we'll catch y'all soon.